Hi, this is Dex, your local friendly therapeutic spiritual counseling specialist, and I have a very interesting subject for this particular talk. This is of a more technical research nature and may not appeal to everyone. It has to do with the research track done through and beyond Scientology, particularly John McMaster's, who was a very important person and researcher in Scientology in the 1960s until he fell out of favor and was gone. But anyway, after he was gone from Scientology, he told a story called The Story of S&D, which I'll summarize and then I'll go from there. In Scientology, there's something called an S&D, which stands for Search and Discovery. It's based on the idea of what Scientology calls PTS, or potential trouble source. The idea that when you are connected to someone who makes you feel squashed, intimidates you, makes you feel threatened and small, this is known as a suppressive person in Scientology lingo, that in that situation you become erratic, subject to illness and mistakes and so forth. Feeling intimidated and all kinds of sensations and conditions can befall you in that condition, and you can be considered unreliable and untrustworthy while you're in that condition. And this actually came out of research that John McMaster did. Oh, again, S&D is a procedure in Scientology called Search and Discovery, in which you're asked questions like, who is it that's been after you? Questions of that nature, to determine who the person is who's causing this effect on you. And there is relief when the actual correct person is recognized, and then you can get processing to help with that situation and condition, and you can be helped with handling of how to deal with that particular person. In Scientology terms, handle or disconnect. And then we get into the Scientology topic of disconnection, but that's not where we're going right now. Anyway, where this search and discovery comes from, the story of S&D, as John McMaster told it, and it can be looked up on the internet as The Story of S&D, John McMaster. Excuse me. And essentially, what occurred was back around 1965, the height of Scientology counseling techniques was something called power processing, which is a marvelous technique. It really is. Anyway, there's a lot of misleading information about it that is taught through the Church of Scientology. I discovered this over time. Anyway, there were sometimes people who weren't getting the full benefits of that processing when they experienced it, or they didn't maintain the gains that they had gotten through that procedure, that process. And so Ron Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard, assigned his right-hand man of that time, John McMaster, to do research and find out why this was and how to fix it. And essentially, what John McMaster found out through his research, he worked with people working under him to run different techniques on people and see what manifested and what occurred. And what he discovered, in his words, were that people had what he called magnetic fields for certain conditions and feelings. And because of these attractions, which is another word for magnetic field, these attractions to certain generally undesirable feelings or conditions, they would somehow find someone in their environment that they could provoke into acting the role of the suppressive person toward them, intimidate them, make them feel squashed, and trigger in them these conditions and sensations. And so John McMaster devised a procedure that basically asked the person, what condition or sensation are you seeking to experience through provoking another person to make you feel vulnerable to that? That's not the exact wording, but that's the type of questions that his research came up with as a solution to this, to identify those things, recognize them, and then process that condition. Now, but that's not the search and discovery question type that's actually used in Scientology. What Hubbard changed it to, he kind of watered it down to just what I was describing, just spotting who that person is who's having that effect on you. But it does not go to the awareness level of helping the person to recognize they're the one pulling that string to make that happen. So therefore, in my perspective, I think that that wasn't the best thing to do, and that McMaster's approach was more thorough and more helpful. And so I think that may be part of the reason that Hubbard changed it the way he did, was to promote the idea that there are a lot of suppressive people around. And then right around that time, he declared that in the things he issued to Scientologists, that anyone who spoke badly of Scientology or would discourage anyone from doing Scientology was one of these suppressive persons. And you did not look past that occurring to see what the individual might have been doing to create a situation with another person, but just to accept that once you labeled somebody a suppressive person, you would just stay away from them and thereby stay in the Scientology cocoon. Anyway, what I'm here to talk about now is that up until a few days ago, I myself hadn't discovered or understood what was behind these magnetic fields, these attractions to these sensations or conditions. It was just simply, that's how it is. And in learning from what my clients manifest in a session, in one particular session, it became very clear to me what is behind this phenomena of these attractions or magnetic fields for certain unpleasant conditions or sensations. And it's this. We are all wearing various identities at various times, and I would describe an identity as it's a persona that a person takes on, and it has limitations, and it has a specific attitude attached to it. And you could call an identity the embodiment of some particular purpose. Okay, so, and an identity is never something that stands alone. It is always an identity that turns up in relation to another identity or more identities that it interacts with in some sort of game, you could call it, some sort of circumstance where there are goals and purposes and oppositions and winning and losing and all the elements of a game. One researcher, Enid Vienne, I believe it's pronounced, called it the games sphere. In Scientology lingo, goals, problems, mass, which is, not very descriptive. In another Scientology researcher, Alan Walter's lingo, it was games matrix. Anyway, the point is that we have various personas, various identities, and the persona that is dominant or present at any given moment depends on what the identities are of the person or people that you see around you and encounter. And so an identity is generally a reaction to other identities that all fall within some particular scenario, some particular game sphere, you could call it, playing field, if you like. And so what happens under these circumstances is these identities, in whichever role they are in at the moment within this game scenario, experience certain conditions and sensations that are basically part of the makeup of the identity. So whatever identity you might be wearing at any given time, you will be below the conscious level seeking to fully create that identity, find another identity that this identity interacts with, and produce those conditions and sensations that are then experienced. And it is that drive to complete that part of the makeup of that identity and experience those sensations and conditions that is what John McMaster recognized as the magnetic fields or the attractions for those sensations or conditions. So that's the breakthrough right there. That's the explanation. That's the missing link of the research that John McMaster did regarding the search and discovery question and why people sometimes don't maintain gains that they've gotten. There are other reasons for this, which I've gone into in other talks. Basically, and most commonly, the stubbornly held protective attitude, which you can read about in my articles or watch in a couple of my other videos. But anyway, for our purposes here, talking about what John McMaster discovered, okay, these magnetic fields that are the reason why a person will find someone that they can provoke into making them feel threatened in some way and react internally with some uh, unwanted, generally unwanted condition or sensation. That's what's behind it. They're fulfilling the role of the identity that they are wearing in the moment. Because being that identity, that is one is driven to do. That is part of the makeup of the identity, certain conditions and unpleasant sensations. So that's the answer, okay? And among others, I have my own types of counseling techniques or processing to unravel such things. So in the end, it all comes out in the wash. But this new discovery that links together how these magnetic attractions fit in with the general situation of the game's playing field scenarios that we all are involved in our identities, uh, actually opens the door to new techniques and improved procedures for addressing such things. It also helps to recognize what type of technique to use in a given situation. For instance, when somebody is complaining about manifesting some undesirable condition or sensation. So now we know more about what that is caused by and what it is connected to. So that will cover this particular talk, and I hope you find this information interesting and enlightening. Thanks for listening, and this is Dexter Gelfand, Dex, speaking from my work as a therapeutic spiritual counselor, and my website is dexsessions.com, dexsessions.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.